Hi, welcome to the Glassworking shop. Well, the pull was more or less successful. It wasn't as straight as I'd like. I am getting better at pulling on smaller pieces. Actually, I'm surprising myself at how my skills are improving at pulling smaller pieces. I'm still kind of struggling with the larger stuff, but hey, one of these days I'll get better. This does give me an opportunity to show another function of the squeezer, which is resizing imperfect pulls. So even though here's a still photograph showing the result after annealing, and you can see that it's got a little bit of a twist and a little bit of unevenness, and well, none of that really matters because I can use the squeezer and I can perfect them using the fixed squeezing dies to squeeze to a particular dimension. So in this case, I'm going to be squeezing to a 1-inch dimension, which is very nice when I go to assemble these pieces into a chip stack. It's nice to have dimensional consistency as well as more or less square corners. I mean, it's glass, so it's never going to be perfectly sharp, but the resized pieces with the squeezer end up a lot more geometrically correct than even a skilled puller can do, just because of the nature of the way glass behaves. So I've prepared in advance some punties, and now I'm going to go over to the kiln and pick up some of my pieces, carefully heat them, and squeeze them into shape. So here goes. I like to preheat my tongs a little bit so that I don't overshock these pieces, hitting them with cold metal. Of course, the metal is still going to be colder than the glass, but hopefully it won't be too big of a problem. And meanwhile, I'm reheating the end of my punty that's been sitting in the kiln. I'm trying to decide which end is going to be better. I think I'm going to work on the better end will be the punty end, and the worse end will be at the far end. So, like I always do, I'm trying to get the punty ripping hot and my murrini piece just hot enough to stick, so that I end up with less distortion of the pattern. Okay, that looks like a nice little stick. And as I've said before, I try really hard to keep my glassworking bench clean. I don't like it when a bench turns into a horizontal trash can. See if I can get a bit of the kiln dust off. So I'm going to be starting out very gently, warming this guy up because I don't want it to explode. even though it's been in the kiln, it probably could use a little bit more gentle heating just to kind of get it up to working temperature. I haven't really had a problem with my glass pieces exploding, and who knows, maybe I could be more aggressive and just throw it right into the flame, but you know, I've got a lot invested in this piece. This is a result of several days of component making, and hey, might as well just be a little bit extra careful, especially since I don't have to do the work. Just let the NQALHA do the work. Which is another comment that I've made in multiple videos, that when you're doing handwork, at least, you know, me, probably not everybody, but at least when I'm doing handwork, sometimes I get impatient. Sometimes my hand gets tired and I just want to make it go faster. And I may be a little too aggressive, and with the NQALHA, since I'm not doing the work and I'm just standing back and watching the machine, makes it easier to go slow. Go slow and careful. So I cut these pieces to 3 1/4 inches, and I managed to get 3 3 1/4 inch pieces out of my pull. The squeezer dies are 4 inches, and so once the piece is resized, that big fat kind of ugly looking end is going to hopefully slim down a little bit when I get this thing into the perfect 1 inch shape, and the final length is going to be somewhere around 4 inches, which is the target that I'm shooting for. So I think I can start turning down the propane a little bit, not using as much of a cold annealing flame, starting to see a little bit of an outer glow. Of course, cold glass is an insulator, and I know that the outer glow really doesn't mean anything, because the inside of the piece is still pretty much dead cold. Get a little delta mag action here, although I'm still being a little bit careful, because I'm trying to uniformly heat the piece without overheating the surface too much. I'm trying to build some core heat, because when I squeeze to do the resizing, I want to make sure that I have a uniform heat all the way through the piece, instead of just trying to resize with a hot outside and a cold inside. It is drooping a tiny bit, which tells me that things are starting to heat up. Looking at the end and seeing, yeah, I'm getting a tiny bit of glow on the end. So give it a few more minutes or a few more seconds, probably not minutes, just a little bit longer on the NQALHA, and then I'm going to switch to handwork. In general, the NQALHA is great for the mindless work, but when you have to pay a little more attention, or maybe direct the heat on the sides without overheating the corners, handwork is always nice. And like I've said many times, The NQALHA is an assistant. It's there to help you. It's not there to do your entire job. So, the really bad part of this pull is the end. So I'm using a little bit of gravity here to get it to elongate a bit, and then going over to the squeezer and giving it the most gentle first squeeze, because since the end is oversized, if I gave it a squeeze with the fixed dies and was too aggressive, I'd end up with bulgent corners. And that's one thing I do not want, is bulgent corners. Of course, the glass, just the nature of glass, is helping me a little bit here, because the natural tendency of glass, the surface tension tends to want to make a round marble. You have a square, you heat it, it's going to want to round off the corners, which is a kind of a good thing for me at this point in the process. And as I've said in previous videos, let me get this squeeze done here. When I first designed the squeezer, I assumed, oh, it's a machine. It's going to take care of everything. All I do is take a piece of glass and stick it in and push the lever and it'll come out perfect. Well, turns out that glass is not as cooperative as my fantasy. It still takes skill. It still takes learning how the glass behaves while being squeezed, and learning how to heat the glass before squeezing, learning how to use gravity, learning how to use the torch top marver and the bench top marver and the paddle, and using every tool that you have available in addition to the squeezer to produce the desired result. Okay, so I'm still being fairly gentle with my squeezing. When I was constructing this pattern, I was standing on it and holding it for a long time, because I was compacting a bunch of pieces that had airspace in them. At this point, hopefully the piece is compacted and consolidated, and so a little more finesse is warranted. I'm pushing down a little bit because the far end of the piece was too big and the punty end is just a tiny bit too small. So I'm using differential heating here to try to stretch out the far end a little, using gravity and differential heating to try to get the far end to droop down a little bit, and then using a little bit of downward force on the punty to get the top to compress a tiny little bit. It's not off by much. It's off by probably less than 1/16 of an inch. But still, that's the nice thing about resizing on the squeezer. You really can perfect the geometry. Of course, you know, as a machinist, I probably shouldn't overuse the word perfect. It'll never be made to, this will never end up with machine shop tolerance. I'll never be able to squeeze within thousandths, but compared to the regular geometric tolerance and geometric quality that a hand worker can achieve, the squeezer really does give a dramatic improvement over at least what I can achieve. Who knows? There's probably people with insane hand skills that can outperform the squeezer, but for me at least, this allows me to take a slightly imperfect pull, and now I'm standing on it. Take a slightly imperfect pull and end up with a very nice result. So it's kind of like getting ready for the last and final squeezle. Standing and holding, standing and holding. And that, remember how irregular the piece looked at the beginning of the operation. That is not quite machine shop tolerance, but certainly excellent. So I'm going to do 3 more of them, but there's probably no reason to keep the camera going and just show another one and then another one and then another one. I think I pretty much have demonstrated how the squeezer can be used for resizing, and I think the rest would just be repetitive. So thank you for watching. It's been fun.